All right, so a lot of parents will talk to me. A lot of loved ones of someone who is stuck will say something that they feel like their child isn't motivated, or they just don't care because um, they see them just laying around, not doing anything, not putting themselves out there, kind of shirking off their responsibilities, and not really going for it. In fact, kind of the opposite. Sometimes they see almost like this willful desire to avoid anything moving forward, and they're saying, they're lazy. And I really push back on that mindset because when I talk to young adults who are struggling, when I talk especially to young men who are stuck, it's not laziness. Yes, they're not doing anything. Yes, they are avoiding responsibility, but that's not what is at the core of it. A lot of them, they're afraid. They are afraid. They're anxious. They don't believe in themselves, and they need to find a way to get past that. Uh, how many times have you noticed that your son, your daughter has started something? They start it with enthusiasm. They have this idea. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to have this happen. And they're so excited about it, but then they quit as soon as it gets hard. That's not laziness. That's fear, right? That's anxiety. That's what I like to call hitting the messy middle. Everything is exciting when you start, right? You see the possibilities, you see how it could work out, and your adult child is excited about finally figuring something out. But everything has a learning curve. Everything has a moment where you realize what it's going to take, what it's really going to take. And in those moments, that's where the insecurities come in. That's where the fear of failure, and really it's the fear that they are going to fail, that they are a failure. That's where you see that come out. And it's in that messy middle part of any process that you see so many people drop out, but especially the young adults. And it's just one more failure, as they see it, on top of all the heaps of failures, and it keeps them stuck. So those are the kind of moments we're talking about. That's the indication. Parents say they're so lazy. They say they're going to do this. They get all excited. They make these promises, and then they just stop. It's not laziness, right? I'm telling you, there's more of a core problem going on there, and that's what we want to address. So, and I already kind of said the the key point of that, and I've said this so many times, but I like to repeat things because we need to hear things repeated to get them in our head. But it's not just that they're afraid of failing, they're afraid of being a failure. That when they fail, it's not just that something didn't work out, or they didn't just learn something. It's evidence that they are a failure. So many people, many young adults learn that failure equals shame, that failure equals that they are a disappointment, and they want to avoid that completely. They just don't want to even try. And that's where it gets into the part where honestly a lot of parents will contact me or reach out to me, or help in general, is it's a pattern, it's a cycle that has continued to the point that it's gotten to a crisis, right? So it's a young person who's, I'm going to try, I'm going to do this, but it doesn't work out. And then they become discouraged, and it tears them down internally, and they get more hesitant to try and more hesitant to try. And every time they halfway try at something, it doesn't work out because they only halfway tried. But it also reinforces that internal fear, and so it gets to a place where they're in total shutdown. And you parents know what I'm talking about, who are in that place, right? They won't even talk to you about goals. They won't even talk to you about their plans. They won't even talk about what's really going on. It's like it's full avoidance of it. And at the real extremes of that is what they're using to avoid. right? And that's where we see the addictive behaviors come in. Their video game use, their um, substance use, and all that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But that's kind of the extreme of where it gets, and that's really someone who is at a place where they just don't believe that they can do it anymore. They don't believe that things are going to work out for them, that their whole life is a failure, and that's a tough place for them to get out of. But um, that's what we're talking about today. A couple of mistakes I want to point out for parents to avoid or loved ones to avoid. And it's really about the way you approach this situation. You know, your son is shutting down, and you come at it with a type of pressure. And some parents, I mean, they're even doing this intentionally. You're going to ramp up the pressure. You know, you have to do something with your life. This is all going to come crashing down. Uh, that rarely works in those moments, right? It's throwing fuel on the fire. They already feel like a failure. They already feel this sense of everything's falling apart. And just coming at it with pressure, trying to ramp that up, that usually creates more of a shutdown or maybe a temporary bit of motivation, right? But that's just to get a parent off their back. And then they go right back to what they were doing, which is avoiding. And so, yes, there's a place for accountability. There is a place for talking about reality. But when the idea is we're just going to add a whole bunch of pressure to them and they're going to see what they're facing and they're going to turn it around, that doesn't work. Or if it does, it's temporary. The other extreme is a mistake to avoid as well. And that's rescuing, right? That's where you go to it's okay. I'll handle this for you. I'll take the pressure off of you. I can't tell you just how many parents are in that dilemma. And I feel for them that they don't want their child to fail because they know how badly they feel about themselves, right? How low their self esteem, their self worth is. And so they try to rescue them. And that's where I see parents getting in a trap where they're doing their college students' homework for them, like literally, like doing a whole course for them, or they're calling in and trying to talk to the boss and help the boss understand why they were late for work again, or they're just the list goes on and on. But it's like I'm going to do whatever I can to keep you from failing or feeling the pain of failure, but they're obviously not learning anything and they become dependent upon that. And that creates another cycle where parents become resentful, right? I've done all this for you. I've done your homework. I've called your boss. I've driven you around. I have covered for you. I've paid for this. I've paid for it again. You've promised this. I've done it over and over and over, and you aren't appreciating it. You aren't taking advantage of it. You're taking advantage of me. And then it turns into anger, which usually goes back to that first point, pressure, right? You're going to put this pressure or criticism. That's another mistake to avoid. You know, you're wasting your potential. We try to be so critical of what they're doing, but all of that doesn't help. And it does tend to cycle. That's what I see in those dynamics. The pressure, the rescuing, the criticism, around and around. So there's got to be a different conversation. There's got to be a different thing that we're going for here. And the the that discussion is more about realizing the role of struggle and pain and anxiety. I actually had a parent say it to me today, and I don't mean like that sounded weird how I was saying it, but it's a common thing. I had a parent, they asked me, how do I take away my son's anxiety? We've got to get the anxiety to go away. And I said, wrong, wrong question, wrong focus. We don't take away anxiety. We don't take away struggle. We don't like to see them anxious. We don't like to see them struggle, but they've got to work through that. Sorry. Um, they have to work through that failure. They have to learn that they can survive and it's going to be okay. And it's really about uh, how they view themselves in those moments. And so I will, well, let me just go ahead and give you, I talked a little bit about this last week too. I call it many times the goal within the goal, right? Whatever your child has said, this is what I'm going for. This is what I'm trying to, my next step or my next thing. Their mind is usually on how can I be successful, which is fine. That's a goal, right? How can I make this work out? How can I make this job work out? How can I get through school this time, get through this semester? How can I, whatever it is that they have set in front of them, but then instantly their mind is all about what if I fail, right? And so the goal is to have success, to hit that initial goal, whatever they set. But there's another goal. It's the goal within the goal, and it's how they see themselves as they're going through that thing, right? As they're moving towards that goal. If it starts to get rough, right? If they start screwing up, if they start feeling anxious, how do they treat themselves? How do they talk about themselves? Do they just tear themselves down? Oh, you such a loser. Can't believe you made that mistake. Or can they be kind to themselves? Can they be encouraging? Can they have a sense of keep going, keep trying? It's how you push. It's the effort you put in. It's not all about the result. Um, and that's many times the goal that we want them to have because that's the one they control. A lot of the bigger goals, your effort matters, but ultimately, how it turns out is not completely in your control, but how you treat yourself, what you believe about yourself, that is. And so we want them to make that connection and work on how they see themselves. So I said I was going to talk about the addiction and kind of the extremes of this fear of failure and lack of belief in themselves. And so what I'm talking about is it gets to such a place where they just have no belief within themselves that they can do something, or their sense of self-worth is so low, their self-esteem, that they're seeking escape. They're seeking something that's going to either make them feel better or make them forget. And that's where these behaviors, the internet addictions, the porn addictions, the substance use, the relationships, uh, become the primary goal. And what that looks like is how can I get high? When's the next time I can get a hold of something? Or in the case of relationships, where's that next girl? Where's that next guy that's going to tell me I'm awesome? That's going to tell me that I mean something, that I'm worthwhile, right? Because that feels so good to have someone tell you you're awesome. I love you. You're amazing. I want you, right? Or to uh, just have a sense of I'm not anxious right now. I'm actually having fun, right? That's the escape that becomes addictive. I was talking to a young man just the other day, yesterday actually, and he was going back and forth with both of them. He was using so many substances, and he had been in many relationships, and when they fell apart or he wasn't able to use, or his consequences because of the use got him in trouble as he was experiencing many consequences. Uh, Everything came crashing down because the thing that he was using to cope and compensate was actually harming him. And so that was um, that was what was going on with him. And what I talked to him about was you uh, your sense of self worth is is so low. You don't even see that you have value. You've become dependent upon these other things. And until he changed what he believed about himself, learned to love himself and to accept himself and to see that he did have value and that there was purpose and meaning to his life, he was likely to continue to go after these things. And these things, these relationships that were fall apart, uh, these substances, right? They would just let him down, and he was in a crisis again and again. And so, and this guy had actually been to rehab and been to a hospital. And I made a point because unfortunately this is kind of reality. I said, "Hey, when you were in the hospital, did they talk about how you see yourself at your core? You know, like how you what you don't like about yourself, how you hate yourself, how you don't believe you're worth anything?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "Did they talk about that in rehab?" No. Now, some rehabs will. I mean, some places they do go deep, but a lot of the approach with that is it's more about safety and getting someone stable and then teaching them skills, and they do a lot of classes and changing a lot of behaviors and patterns. All that is great and wonderful and needed, but a lot of what's not happening in conversations with parents is this like what's really going on inside of you. How do you see yourself? What do you believe about yourself? Where's your value? Where's your sense of self-worth? So that is what I want to leave you with as you're watching this. When you're dealing with someone who is really struggling and they're stuck, is to have that deeper conversation, right? To be able to share with them what you believe about them, right? That you see their worth and their value and you care about them, even if they can't see it themselves. And to maybe talk about the wounds or talk about the reasons why they don't believe they can do it, right? Why they're so afraid of failing. And then that conversation about what is failure, right? It, it's a part of life. When we try, when we put ourselves out there, things don't always work out. But that doesn't mean that we're a loser. That doesn't mean that we're worthless. And that's the kind of conversation. So what does trying and struggling mean about you, right? Having that discussion. And yes, you can talk about reality. There is a place for boundaries, right? That is a part of it. Is we're not going to pay for this forever. We're not going to be okay with this behavior. We're not going to support these things. There is a place for boundaries, and many times that's like the foundation of motivation for someone. You know, the reality. But if they're not dealing with what's going on the inside, that fear of failure, uh, they're likely not going to be able to get unstuck. So that's the message for tonight.